Oh,
Hey, Goldie, can you hear me? Hello?
hey, yeah, I can hear you.
It's very early for. Oh, hi.
Hey, okay, well, um, how are you?
I'm so tired, but I think I'll be fine. So the interview will be on Tuesday my time, Wednesday your time,
Um,
and I don't know. Like, so I think you heard the feedback from Ross last time, right? And
yeah,
what do you think? Like, I felt if I fail this time, I'm gonna fail. Like that's
yeah, I think it's important for you to get this one right. Um, sorry, my general sense is that your performance in the previous interview was very good in some aspects, but also very bad in some, which is why they are giving you another chance to see if the very bad aspects was a fluke, right, and can actually be worked on.
okay.
I think what you really showed previously, right, in the previous interview, which you should definitely keep showing, is your ability to kind of connect the dots. Once you realize the data that you do have, your math is also really, really good. Right? The ideas are good. The thing that you weren't able to kind of showcase was your ability to read charts properly
Yeah.
and the communication skills, right? Like providing structured answers to brainstorming questions, so to speak. Um, Personally, based on my sessions with you in the past, I think you can do it. It was probably also just because you weren't familiar with the format and you kind of rushed in to like use chart data without really looking at all the stuff, but also providing an answer without really thinking through the structure of your answer.
Mhm.
So for today, I do want us to do a written interview format. In case that's also the format of your interviews on Tuesday/Wednesday. But at the same time, right, it's also kind of, I guess, a quick refresher on chart reading and structured communication.
Yeah. So is I was surprised that they say my weakness is in structure because I felt like during my session with you or my practice, I really try to hone that area. But I really think that the written case really kind of sweep my feet off because I just felt there's so much information that I need to understand first and then structure it. So honestly, it's very hard. And even at the end of the case, actually, I wasn't really sure what I was saying. So just rambling.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. And also the word parcel, I didn't get it. Like I got it to the end. It's just very, how to say, kind of like hard to grasp upon from my
mm,
understanding. Yeah.
yeah. And there's an art to, even when you're not 100% sure of what you're saying, to still sound structured. And the key there, this I totally cheat and I always do this, is even if I'm not sure, right? I always say I have three things I think is important for you to know. And then I kind of just scramble to think of those three.
Okay.
Like I've got like all these random thoughts and I just try to bucket it into like key ideas just to make it sound structured.
Yeah. Because I know that's really important. That's the most
Yeah.
important.
Cause
Yeah.
like I'll tell you a secret, right? In consulting, I think 50% of my projects did not involve like fancy data analytics or like understanding the problem, whatever. A lot of it is actually just repackaging what the client already knows. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes, clients bring us in.
Having a cold.
Huh?
Are you
Sorry.
having a cold?
Yeah, I do.
I'm
Sorry.
so sorry.
No, it's okay. But a lot of times, right, they know what the problem is, they know how to solve it, but they're unable to convince the board of their solutions. So they actually bring in consultants to help them repackage the data and show it in a structured, convincing manner, because they're unable to do it on their own, which is why they put such a premium on communication skills.
Okay. But why?
Consultants.
Why couldn't they do it?
Because like um well, you've worked in VC, so it's a bit different. But in the industry, a lot of people, they've got the expertise, right? Have you ever worked with engineers, or do you have like engineer friends?
No. I do have engineer friends.
Well, I don't know if it's true for them, but like for me, right, my engineer friends, when you ask them something, they go into really technical explanations that you as a non-engineer, you're like, I don't understand. Like, just tell me the 5-second version. So industry people are the same because they're so deep into their level of expertise. It's difficult for them to take a step back and think of the bigger picture and present implications on a bigger picture level.
Okay.
But a lot of companies, that's why when you reach like manager level, they start providing you kind of leadership, communication skills training, but it is quite different from what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. I also want to discuss with you a little bit about the interview itself. So I found that the video interview is actually really hard. I got really nervous.
But
like,
all of our sessions are video interviews. Why?
We talk like we we talk and we chat, but like with them, it's just like I have to give the right answer 1 second away. So I think it's different in that sense. So I just got really nervous, and I'm trying to calm myself a little bit because my next round will be with another manager, and he's a Chinese, and I'm afraid of interviewing with Chinese people. They're really harsh because they're just sharp. I think they're just, I don't know. You know what I mean?
You can do it.
I'm just rambling. I'm sorry. But
No, that's okay. And my advice to you is always, when you're doing these sessions, have fun, right? Like, don't go in and think, oh my gosh, the manager's Chinese. He's super harsh. I'm dead, right? Then, of course, you'll be nervous. But if you enter the session, this is what I did. I entered the session. The partner was like super cute. I was like, oh, he's so cute. Then it's kind of like, then you're less nervous, right? It's like, oh, okay. And you kind of just treat him as a friend, like, oh, because they also want to see your personality shine through.
yeah.
And if you're super nervous, you're unable to, like, not tell jokes, but be relaxed, provide context, etc. Because you're kind of like they're blinders on, and you're just like, okay, this is the one question I have to answer. Versus if it's a friend, even if they ask you that one question, because you're naturally curious and busybody, you answer the question, but you're also like, hey, but you know what? You also have to think of these things, right? Because they're also important to consider. But yeah, okay. That's always my advice. Think of something random about the interviewer so that you're less nervous, right? Whether he's cute or, oh, that's such a nice, I don't know, nice tie or nice haircut or whatever, right? Okay. To make yourself feel like more personal, more intimate with that person. And then the second is just think of him as a friend.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, cool. Shall we start?
Yeah, let's start. So I actually printed all of these.
Yes.
But I bundled them randomly. So how should we do it?
Oh, okay. No worries. I don't actually have any preference on how you read the slides. For me, right, how I plan to run it is I'll give you 3 minutes with all the slides. Just look through it.
Okay.
I'll give you context first. Mm-hmm. You look through all the slides, and then I have a series of questions I'll be asking you.
Okay, cool. So let's start.
Okay, cool. So our client today is a PE firm that focuses on consumer goods in the middle to high income markets. Essentially, products that middle to upper middle class population would use. Mm-hmm. They're currently considering acquiring Red Retailer, a high-end fashion apparel brand in Vietnam. Okay. Red Retailer currently owns manufacturing as well as distribution companies in Southeast Asia. Okay. Our research team has already provided us a couple of kind of background information on both the market and Red Retailer, which is seen in the kind of the charts that we've shared with you. Okay. Take your time. You've got around 3-4 minutes to look things through, and then we can start discussing.
Right. Before I start, I want to ask some clarification questions. So Basically, our goal is just to see whether the retailer actually have the potential to generate enough return for us.
Correct.
What's our
So
what's the return?
I guess our goal is to understand, should we purchase red retailer, right? That's pretty much, I guess, the big question. But there are also kind of a series of sub-bullets that I'd love for us to discuss. But I think easier for us to discuss once you have a better idea of the market and the company.
Okay. So
okay. Yeah.
Right. So basically, the first step was just to understand the market first, and then we can discuss whether possible too.
Yeah. Look through the charts. I think they're very informative. Okay, cool. I'll just get a glass of water.
Okay, cool. Just time me. Sorry, Goldie. I think when I printed, there's some information was missed. Let me just quickly.
Yeah, sure. In total, you should have 18 charts.
Yeah, I think I have all of them. It just I think some number got cut off, like the total number of it.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just get that.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, let me double check and I'll do it quickly.
Okay, sure.
All right, I think I finished. Okay, let's start. Let's start the timing.
Okay, you've got 1 minute left, and then let's start.
Oh no! And let's restart. I'm sorry.
Oh wait, what do you mean by restart?
Because I've been filling the number in, so I haven't read it.
What? Okay. Okay, sure. Then I'm giving you another 4 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, cool. Wrap up soon, then we can start discussing.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Shall we start?
Yes.
So,
Right. Yeah.
I guess question number one, right, is would you recommend that our client acquire Red Retailer, keeping in mind that the client's investment thesis is that investments should break even in 4 years, and the asking price from Red Retailer is $2 billion?
Okay. If that's the case, can I quickly do a calculation?
Yeah, sure. Do you mind if you walk me through how you plan to calculate first, just to make sure that you're on the right track?
Yeah, so how about I walk you through the calculation first, and then we can discuss what I have found in the chart.
Yeah, sounds good.
So right, the break-even point for us is 4 years, and the purchasing price is $2 billion. And what I need to know is the current revenue the Red Retailer have, which is 2018, and I have is 1.04 billion. And in 4 years, we know the growth rates, the projected for this. So I think for year one is 5%, and consecutively will be 10% each year. I'll just use this growth rate to have the each year's potential profits that for us in order to calculate all the profits. And we also know the gross margin for Red Retailer now. I believe it's 70%. So if that's the case, I'll quickly calculate the current profits in 2018 of Red Retailer, which will be 1.04 billion times 70%. Which gives me 0.98 billion for 2018. And we know for 2019, the growth rate is 5%. And
just to check, right, why are you using 5%?
Because I think the projected synergy from client to retail, here I see the 5% growth. So on the slides here.
Sorry, which slide? Do you mind sharing with me the slide title?
So it's projected synergy from clients through Red Retail.
Okay.
So here I see that after purchasing, there probably will be a potential synergy of growth of profits for us. So I'm assuming that the gross profits will increase from since the purchase, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. But how did you understand like the 5% improvement in gross margin?
What I understand is that our current profits is 980 million.
By the way, that's not profit, right? That's gross margin. Just to be very clear, there's a difference.
Oh, that's gross margin, correct. Yeah, but here it also says is the gross margin, right?
Mm-hmm. So, but profit is not gross margin. I just want to be very clear on the terms that we're using.
Oh, okay. Then if that's the case, but I don't see any costs categories here except the marketing costs. Oh, we also saw the operating margin. Those right. sorry. So I'll use the operating margin, actually. So the overall formula would just be to have the gross margin for the consecutive 4 years, and then I'll assume that operating margin remains the same for the next 4 years, and to calculate each year's profits. Does it make sense?
Yes, makes
Do
sense.
we also consider times of value here?
No need. I have a question, right? How do you plan to calculate the profit year on year? Like I guess the revenue year on year.
The revenue year on year? I'll use the market. I think I'll use the projected market growth here.
Okay.
For the market. So we know that for 2019. Okay, so that's a question because we know the growth rate here have different leverage for each segment. So one way we could do that is that we assign a market share with a growth rate to have a weighted average, or we could just distribute them the same with our current with a growth rate. Which one do you think that makes sense?
I think neither. We do know the base number, right? It's 1.04 as the total revenue of Red Retailer. We can actually break down to the respective segments.
Okay. Of the Red Retailer. Okay. Cool. I think from this graph I'm seeing from 2018 Red Retailer, let me quickly see this. So I'll just assign number here because for this chart, the breakdown of Red Retailer revenue by type, that's over time breakdown revenue, right?
That's 2018.
That's 2018. Can I just use this number here?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
But by the way, yes, you can. Okay, yes, you can.
Here it says the total revenue is 1 billion. It's now 1.4.
That's okay. It's like okay. 1.04. It's quite small.
Okay, cool. So I'll just use 1 billion. And I'm seeing here that on 2018, the breakdown of high end is around like 55%.
Use 60%.
Okay, 60%. And for as for the value one, can I just assume it's 15%?
1.6
or 1.5?
Sure, you can use 20. Oh, sorry, 15 or 20?
20. So do we use 20 here?
I think use 15. Sorry, 15.
15. Okay. Right. So the rest would just be the traditional. That is 350 million. So now we have total revenue breakdown for each segment of higher and high-end value and traditional, which is corresponding to 600 million, 150, and 350 million. And now we know that the growth rate of each year. So what I can do here is that I can calculate the growth rate for the consecutive 4 years, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm seeing the slide projected growth rate for Vietnamese retail market, 2019 to 2023. And I'll just need to calculate from 2019, 2020, and 2021 to the growth rate. So the overall formula I'm going to use here is I'll just use the weighted average. I'll just use the weighted average of the growth, but by breaking down each segment. So for 2019, the high end is 5%. So I'll just use 60% times 5% plus 60. And that's the total percentage of high end that year.
Sorry, walk me through it again.
Yeah, so for the high end of 2019 market share, I'll just use the 60% and times 5% plus 60%.
60% times 5%. Okay, yeah, okay. Plus 60%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I'll just use 600 million times
Yes.
1.05.
Yes, I think that's less complicated.
Yeah. Cool. So the method will be used similarly for other segments. I'll just quickly do the calculation.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So for 2019, the total revenue I got is around 1.148 billion.
Okay.
I'll just round up to 1.2 billion. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm currently calculating 2020 number using
Okay.
the simple.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right. So sorry for taking that long. So the total revenue for the consecutive 4 years will be 1.15 billion, 1.2 billion, and 1.24 billion. I rounded up some numbers here to make it more simple, if that makes sense.
Okay, so what's your revenue for 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022?
So for 2019 is 1.14.
Hmm?
So I just rounded up to 1.15. And for 2020 is 1.19, and for 2021 is 1.24.
Your 2019 seems a bit high. What's your high end?
My high end is 630.
Okay, what's your traditional?
Traditional is 361.
How come? What was your 2018 base?
Is 350.
Mm,
Oh, it's 250.
mm.
Okay. Oh my god. Then I have to recalculate everything.
Just recalculate for traditional.
Okay. Okay, so the
Okay,
2019 total revenue will be 1.05 billion.
okay,
And for 2020 is 1.08.
okay.
And for 2021 is 1.13. And for
Mm-hmm.
2022 it's 1.16.
Okay,
Okay. And our base year is 1 billion.
yep.
So this is the projected, I guess, the revenue for a red retailer. And I'll just start with another sheet. And we also know that the formula for profits basically will be the revenue times gross margin and times times minus expenses of the operating expenses and
Correct.
to total profits. And we currently have the operating margin, I think, for a red retailer. So our current operating margin is 40%. So if we could increase the gross margin by 10%, that must mean if our other expenses of operating expenses remains the same, the incremental will also transfer to the operating margin. So I'll just use the incremental percentage to transfer to the operating margin. That makes sense to you?
Okay.
Okay. So I'll start with another sheet with the headlines of all the years. Write down all the revenue.
Okay, I just need to go get water again. Sorry.
Okay.
Zoe, suggest you do 1 year as an example. Run it by me first before you calculate for the rest.
Okay, cool. So let's calculate for the operating margin for 2019 first. So the revenue, the operating margin I use is just 40% times 1 plus 5%. If that makes sense.
Yep.
And that would be that would be 42%.
Okay.
And I'll use 1.05 times 42%. Doesn't make sense.
Let me think about it, right? So why do you think it's 40% times 1 plus 5%?
Because we know there will be improvement in gross margin, but we don't have more information in terms of the operating expenses. So I'll just transfer it directly from the improve of gross margin to the improve of operating margin.
Yeah, but then by doing 40% times 1 plus 5%, you're assuming the 5% improvement in gross margin is on the revenue as a whole, which is not true.
Oh, okay. So how should we do about it?
Why don't you have a think? You have all the information you need to calculate this.
Okay, let me rethink about this. So we know the gross margin is 70%. I can calculate a gross margin and then use the same operating margin here.
Okay.
Which is 4%. Does that make sense?
Walk me through it, because I'm not 100% sure if what you're saying is going to translate to the right thing. So how would you calculate that?
I'll be calculating first by the gross profits for each year, and then I'll multiply by the same operating margin for the rest of you to get a total profits.
is that fair though? Right? Because then you're assuming that the operating cost is increasing, what do you call it? Is increasing at the same rate as your gross margin. How can you calculate for operating cost today? You actually have enough information to calculate for this.
The operating cost.
Yes.
Oh, the operating cost would just be the revenue minus the operating margin.
Minus the operating margin?
Minus operating profits. Oh, that would be the total cost. So, that would be the gross profits minus the operating profits.
Okay.
Okay. So gross profits today is 700 million. Operating profits is 400 million. So the operating cost will be 300 million. Would be 30% of the cost. 30% would be operating cost. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Now, how
Okay.
do you use that to calculate?
Okay, let me think. So can we just assume that our operating cost will remain the same? The percentage will remain the same for the following years?
Yes.
So will be always be 30%.
Yeah. 30% of what? Just to make sure we're correct. Okay. Yep.
Sorry, I have to my paper here.
No worries.
This is so hard. I'll restart because everything's so messy now. Can I just round up number?
Yes, feel free.
Do I have to get an exact number? Because I think I'm seeing patterns here that I think we can break even.
Okay. And
So
roughly, why is that? Right? No need to give me the exact numbers.
yeah, so the profits we're having is 400 million today, and if we with the incremental gross margin, the next year will be around 500 million, and then the margin will, so the profits will be increasing each year, around 500 million. And if we use 500 times 4, that will be exceeding 2 billion.
Okay.
So we can break even with this amount of money, with this amount of projected growth of the market as well as of the gross margin.
Okay, sounds good. What are the risks of acquiring Red Retailer?
Yeah. Is this related to the reading the audit charts part, or is it kind of
Just let me know, right? Like, yes, it sounds like we're recommending them to acquire, but what are the potential risks involved that you want the PE firm to know?
okay? Just 1 second. Right. So there are several risks. Based on our findings analysis we've done. So the only reason that we can generate this much of profits is because that we have
Okay,
projected.
Zoe, pause. Try to be structured. Okay.
Okay. There are 3 risks.
Okay.
So there are 3 risks that I've identified. The first is that the projected growth that we have imposed on this analysis, it's by 10% each year of the gross margin. However, that might not be true because from the current business model, most of our customers are coming from, most of the sales are generating from the first customer rather than the returning customers. So that will be potential risk. And the second risk I
Sorry.
identified.
And just to be clear, right? So is the risk because we're unable to retain customer loyalty? Or what was the 10% you were talking about a while ago?
The gross margin growth.
Okay, what does that have to do with your first customer versus returning customer?
I'm just trying to hear the link, like what would kind of deteriorating this like gross margin growth.
Okay. Okay.
And, so let me think about it. So,
and Zoe, take your time here, right? I think it's more important for you to practice kind of synthesizing your thoughts.
okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so there are three risks that I've identified through analysis.
Okay.
The first is that the gross margin growth, or the projected gross margin growth that we imposed. The second will be the channels risk, and the third will be the customers.
Okay.
So I'll start with the first one. In analysis, we projected the gross margin growth will be the same throughout the following 4 years, will be 10%. However, that might not be true because the current the retail market growth within each segments actually are all below 10%. So unless we can generate a lot of synergies from our current portfolio companies or our existing management capacity, I doubt that that kind of growth will be maintained in its consecutive years. The second will be channel growth, the channel risk. The current retailers major revenue comes from the online channels compared to other competitors. That will be a potential risk. Okay, that will be a potential risk.
No, sorry. Can you repeat that? Are you saying that majority of our, okay, yep, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So the majority of their current revenue is generated from the online channel.
And you're saying that this is higher? Sorry, quick check. And are you saying that this is higher compared to our other competitors?
Correct.
Can you prove it to me? What chart are you looking at?
Yes, so the chart I'm looking at is breakdown by of sales by channel.
Okay.
So we're at a medium.
Okay.
So it's half and half, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So the other risk identified would be the channel risk. Currently, our revenue is generated half and half by both online and offline channels. That kind of like channel structure probably doesn't give us a potential advantage in both ways. So in order to pursue one type of growth, the high growth, I think we need to hone on the driver of the future growth in each channels. The
Okay.
third risk identified will be the customer risk. During a competitive benchmark analysis, we found that most of the retailers' customer are actually composed with the first-time users compared to two other competitors. That will be a potential risk because that means the customer loyalty hasn't been generated in the company, and it's an uncertainty to see that whether these customers will return to retailers. So further analysis of what kind of products are we currently offering to these customers, as well as what kind of SKUs is being generated to see whether customers are sticky to the current.
Zoe, you are frozen on my screen. Okay, cool. Now you're moving again. Sorry. Do you mind like turning off your video? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Hey, okay. Sorry, do you mind repeating your last 3 sentences on customer loyalty?
Yes. So the third risk identified will be the customer loyalties. Based on the current data, most of the customer are from the retailers are coming from the first-time users. So it will be uncertain for us to see that whether these users will be returning to the platform. And more analysis such as SKU as well as customer stickiness analysis should be operated before we draw more conclusions on this.
Okay, cool. What about the chief designer? Do you have any concerns about that?
Yeah, I do see that. I think that's definitely will be another risk for us. Let me just quickly get it.
What do you think is the risk of the chief designer leaving?
Yes, so I think 2 risks. The first is that some customer will be leaving the platform for the cheap designers because a lot of high-end customers are actually pursuing designers by default. And the second is that if the cheap designer will join a competitor platform, that will be a even huge risk for us in the future.
Okay, cool. And if you had to kind of rank the priority of, let's say, before the PE firm will acquire red retailer, they need to fix things, right? How would you prioritize the different risks?
Okay. I think I definitely will prioritize the customer as well as the chief designer risk first, based on 2 criteria. The first is the feasibility, and second is the kind of like the importance of the issues. So for feasibility, I think chief designers is something that we can influence by offering more compensation to the chief designers or having their own brands within the platform. And as for the customers, I really do think it's the most prioritized risk of the current platform because without returning customers, all the GMU or the sales generated by the platform is not substantiated and doesn't prove the value proposition of rat retailer. So I think the current growth should be substantiated with the customer loyalty. And for that, I think we should do more analysis on the customer side.
Got it. Okay, cool. And what about cost side? Any risks that you see that we should be concerned about there?
Let me see. I think for cost, actually, we're on a pretty good side because our operating margin is actually highest among three players. The other thing I noticed is that our current marketing spend is the lowest among the three. So I think we're pretty good with the current cost structure, giving this sense. But let me quickly look.
Yeah, sure.
So our gross margin is not the best. It's definitely fall behind by the first player. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'll just call them ND. So it's probably our cost of goods sold or our inventory, management probably have some chance to be improved in the near future. And I think that could be compensated by our synergy after the acquisition, because as we can see, the synergy could happen in the following 4 years as for gross margin.
Got it. Okay, cool. And that's it. That's the case. What were your thoughts?
Oh my God, this is so hard.
Okay, walk me through it, right? Where, I guess number one, right? As you were looking through the charts in the beginning, before you had any of the questions and what to do, how were you looking through the chart?
Okay, so I just briefly looked through the title. And then noticed that just for the markets, there are 3 types. So for the market, a high end and the red retail itself. And then there's a time expand, like from 2018. So the first thing I did is I just jot down all the market size for each segment, and also by 2008 to 2018 to see whether the red retail is growing higher than the market. And the answer is yes. That's a good sign. And the second, I just look at a competition landscape. So for that, I think I got a little bit swept off because there's just so many information. So I saw there's a channel information, a customer, and also the margin. So the margin is actually where I move on to the last. But I just jot down some notes saying that, what did I say? So, I realized the retailers' channels is dominated by currently dominated by offline, but over time they're online, but over time the offline existence channel is increasing. I also noticed the 2 other competitors, ND, their physical store is increasing much higher than us. So that's a red flag for me.
Hey, that didn't come out in your risk.
Yeah, that didn't. Yeah, I forgot. That didn't. Yeah, so here's the thing. I think for a recent case, there's just so many information that I think it's hard to keep track. And also you have to go deep at the same time. I think within a time frame.
Tip for you. What I do when I have a lot of information, right? To your point, you were telling me there are actually like 4 different information points that's given. The first is just pure market data, which helps show market growth, competitive landscape. The second is your red retailer specific data. The third is channel information. The fourth is customer information. And then there's the chief designer. So what you should do, or what I would suggest you do when you're faced with like so much data, right, is you actually start bucketing the data that you have. So you've got a pile of like slides that's all channel. You've got a pile of slides that's all customer stuff.
Mhm.
and then get a piece of paper per bucket, right? And just write already on the piece of paper your initial impressions. Let's say on your channel, you see a decline in online sales as a proportion of total sales for Red Retailer, less stores compared to their competitors, and by the way, also smaller online marketing spend compared to competitors, right? That way, you use your chart reading time wisely, in that your initial impressions you've already collated, right? Synthesized into one page. And you do that for each bucket. Don't do it slide by slide because there's so many of them.
Okay.
Right? That's number one. And then that way, you always know in these types of cases, at the end, they will ask you like a brainstorming question. And you've already got your cheat sheet in place with all of these things. That's number one. Number two, especially for this case, right? You already have a pretty good idea of what type of calculation you'll have to do. Because it's a PE firm, they want to break even, all that stuff. So you have a good idea of, okay, I think you need to calculate revenue growth. No need for you to calculate yet because you're not 100% sure that's what's needed. But you already start pulling out the slides that will be relevant to calculate this.
Okay.
And in this case, because your revenue growth numbers are broken down by segment type, it's a good indication that you actually will need to know what are the value numbers for each segment type for Red Retailer. Right?
Okay.
So just start being proactive about these things. And then you also saw that you've got synergy numbers on gross margin, which probably means your gross margin and operating margin slides are going to be important.
Yeah.
So these things you can already separate because you know these are what's important for calculation.
Okay.
So you've got your charts that will be important for your quantitative analysis, and then you've got your charts that are more qualitative.
Yeah.
That way, when you start solving, you can ignore all the qualitative stuff and just focus on quantitative stuff.
Okay.
Right. So that's one way to make better use of your time when chart reading.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Let me pause here. Any questions?
No.
Would this help? Like if you imagine the previous case, right? The one you did with the interviewer on parcels and all that stuff.
I think it will help, but because he sent me a virtual one. So I think that's even harder.
It is.
Yeah. But I think it makes sense. So your suggestion is basically to have 4 pieces of paper by buckets.
Or how many pieces of paper, depending on how many buckets you have.
Yeah, so just one paper for one bucket.
Yeah. And then
you want to mix them together.
Yeah. So even if it's virtual, right? You've got, let's say, your 4 pieces of paper, and then you can write, it's like your summary, channels. And then you say, okay, these are slides 1, 2, 3. Key findings, 1, 2, 3. And then you've got another piece of paper, customer findings, using slides, whatever. And then you've got another piece of paper, quantitative analysis to calculate for break even. We'll probably need to use slides, blah, 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 blah. What you have there is market data, Red Retailer breakdown, growth, and your cost data.
Yeah.
Right? So you already start attributing per slide so that when the interviewer asks you something, it's easier for you to reference back to what you already have.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay.
Yes. Okay, it's all about bucketing and structuring in your head.
Yeah, so I think I'm so familiar with the structuring of the verbal case, but I think I forgot that in the written case, I actually need to use the same methods of structure. That will save a lot of time.
Everything applies. So you just need to keep that in mind and practice because it's easy to forget, right? It feels very different, but it's not.
Okay.
Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, I thought you did a fantastic job of laying out kind of the formula of how you plan to do things. The only problem here is In a normal case where you only have like limited data, this is sufficient, right? Because it's very clear what data points you'll use. Here, because you have so much data, when you tell me, okay, I'll calculate for revenue, and then from there I've got gross margin, calculate synergies, and then I'll get the net profit. I'm like, okay, it sounds right, but how you calculate for it is a whole different matter, right? Because you've got so much data. So there are multiple ways you can go about it. So what you should keep is still tell me what's your formula, and then how you plan to go about it, be very clear, right? Tell me what data do you plan to use from what chart, and how do you plan to use it?
Okay, can you demonstrate for me?
Yes, okay. So in this case, right, you can say that in order to calculate to check whether red retailer can break even within 4 years or not, there are 3 steps that need to occur. The first is I need to figure out what are the revenue per segment for retailer today, high-end, traditional, and value. To do that, I am going to look at the red retailer revenue breakdown by segment slide, which shows me high-end has like 60%, traditional has 25%, and value has 15%, as well as, well, yeah, that's all I need. Multiplied by, wait, I need to check what slide it is also. Actually, no, that's really all I need to get like the breakdown, right? And then from there, I can then apply the growth rate per segment year on year based on the projected growth rate for Vietnamese retail market. The assumption here is that we will grow in line with the market, which may or may not be true. Once I have that, I will then be able to calculate for total revenue year on year for red retailer. Step 3 then is I need to calculate for the new operating margin. To do that, I will calculate for the new gross margin, taking into account the synergies, which can be seen in the synergy slide, minus the operating cost, which I will keep constant.
Yeah.
And that one I will be able to calculate using the current gross margin minus the current operating margin. So roughly, the assumption is it's 30% of revenue.
Okay.
Once I have those numbers, step 4 then is I will just add all of this up, not taking into account time value of money, and then check if it's greater than 2 billion. Does this make sense?
It makes sense. It's just a lot of calculation.
Yes, but the point here is even before you start the calculation, right? That's how detailed your formula should be, right? Like these are your steps. This is the data I'll be using to calculate, and so on.
Okay.
Why? Because even for your parcels case, right? If you do it this way, the interviewer can actually chime in and say, hey, by the way, remember the data you're using right now, it's only for this market. It's not the entire market. So it's very clear then that you're missing one step.
Okay.
It will also help structure it in your head so that as soon as you finish laying out all of this, you can then just focus, right? You know that to calculate this, you're only using these 2 slides, and so on.
Okay. So I have trouble, I think, in the calculation that how does the operating margin and gross margin related?
Okay, but quick question to you, right? Are you clear on the difference between the 2?
I think I'm clear. Let me tell you what I think. So for gross margin, basically is the revenue minus the cost of goods sold, and that's it.
Correct, yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that's it. And that's the measure of basically the gross profits without any like fixed cost stuff.
Correct.
And for operating margin, we would include the SG&A, utilities, labor, blah, blah.
Yes.
But as for the margin, so they're all based on the total revenue.
Correct.
I'm just wondering, do we have any quick way to do the operating cost from the margin solely?
Yeah, so actually the fastest way is operating cost as a percentage of revenue is basically gross margin minus operating margin.
Oh, damn. Okay. Yeah, because their bases are the same.
Correct.
Okay, got it. That'll be much quicker. And so here, the only thing that's changing is the gross margin.
Yes.
If gross margin is changing,
operating margin will change as well.
yeah, that's true.
But that's why, right? What that means then for you is you simplify. Instead of thinking of it as operating margin, just subtract operating cost from your new gross margin.
But new gross margin is from the new revenue.
Yes, but that's less of a concern, right? Because if you, wait, I'm going to show you how I lay it out.
Okay, that'd be great.
And this is an Excel, so don't feel jealous. Because I have Excel and you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so this is what I have. That's the projected growth rate, etc. So that's the blah, blah, blah. So I just laid out in terms of total sales, new gross margin, new operating margin, right? And total sales, you have this. It's literally just adding up all your segment revenue. My new gross margin is essentially, right, your total sales multiplied by the change given the synergies, which you also have. Then my new operating margin, instead of calculating the percentage of operating margin against gross margin, I just get new gross margin and subtract it by total sales times 30%.
Oh.
So I don't.
Wait, how do we do that? So we use.
So it's your gross margin, because if you remember, right, operating margin is really just gross margin minus overhead cost or fixed cost.
Yeah.
So I don't care about percentages. All I need to do is get the gross margin, which right now is 0.78, minus total sales times 30%.
Oh, okay. Minus, okay.
Right. That should simplify things.
So you don't have to go extra step for that.
Yes.
That makes sense.
So that one is a bit tricky, but as long as you keep in mind what gross margin and operating margin really means and how you calculate for it, then you can kind of just play around with it.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, that's on the calculation side. Now, on the risk side, how did you feel now that you've structured, when you had to structure your communication?
I definitely feel I would take much more time to structure it. And I'm really happy that you helped me to say, okay, just structure it, because I didn't even realize that I wasn't structured. Yeah. And after structuring it, I realized that I definitely feel there are a lot of risks I haven't mentioned, but for the time's sake, I just randomly put 3s on it.
Yeah. Like what kind of risks did you feel you weren't able to mention?
So definitely, I feel a common risk is that our projection is not right.
Yes.
So I will mention that. But by mentioning that, I also felt I need some evidence. So that's why the first time I said it, I just randomly draw upon my impression that I got.
Which is like what?
But that's not correct. So then I think about it. So okay, so a reasonable comparison will be compared to the market growth.
Yes.
And the second is, so I just remember there's some parts about a channel and so about a customer. So there must be some risk over there. So I just throw on that. But I didn't think through of the channel. So now I see about it is that, so the rare retailer, they are split between online and offline, but their physical stores not growing as much. So that would be a risk. But how do you synthesize that?
Okay, so let me help you, right? So number one, this is the value of when you're chart reading, you're already bucketing, because then it's very clear how many risks you have. You've got a channel bucket, you've got a customer bucket, you've got a calculation bucket, all that stuff. So that's your cheat sheet. You can reuse that. Now, in terms of synthesis, right? Sorry. Okay. So sample answer could be, there are 5 risks involved based on what I see. There's one around customers. There's the second around the chief designer and our dependency on her. Third is on channel. Fourth is on cost. And then the fifth is on our assumptions when calculating for potential growth. Let me go through it one by one. The first on customer is, based on the data we've seen, compared to competition, a large proportion of our customers are actually first-time customers. This seems to show that we are unable to maintain customer loyalty because your returning customer is very low. There are a couple of implications to this, right? But the most important one is this means our customer acquisition cost is high because there's no lifetime value.
Oh.
If we had more time, I would want to look further into this to understand why we are unable to engender customer loyalty. Is it because we don't have a loyalty program? Is it because they're unsatisfied with our service or our products, etc., etc.? Because this is very, very important, right? The second is, in terms of the chief designer, how dependent are we on him or her? E.g., our best-selling designs made by her? If she leaves, will we lose the confidence of our investors? How integral is she to our company, right? Because you've got like companies like YSL where the designer's name is literally the brand, right? So how important is he or she? And equally important, right? If she leaves, can we prevent her from going to our direct competitors? Right? This one, I think, as you mentioned, easier for us to handle, either by giving her better incentives or at the very least, having a non-compete clause, which will prevent her from going to competition. The third risk involved is on channel. What I noticed is that through the years, our retail sales has actually increased as a proportion of total sales. This surprised me because just based on my understanding of what's happening globally or in the industry is that online sales is actually really increasing. And equally surprising, right, is because compared to our competition, we actually have less retail stores, which to my mind would mean we would want to leverage online even more. One hypothesis I have here is because of our low online marketing spend compared to competition, that might be why online sales is actually decreasing. Again, something I really want to look at, just because three things, right? We have less retail stores, so we may want to focus more on online. Two, this might be easily remedied if we just improve our online marketing spend. And then three, just want to understand, are there other channels for us to look at? And will this mix remain constant? Fourth is on the cost. Our operating margin is actually really, really good compared to competition, probably because we have less stores, so there's less overhead involved, like rent, employees, store employees, etc. So that's good. But I noticed that our gross margin is actually higher than Ngoidep. So what that tells me is that there's probably a chance to improve COGS. Either because we're also manufacturing, right? So either we can improve our manufacturing efficiency, or maybe it's the distribution, right? How we get the stuff to our stores. There might be synergies and efficiencies that we can really see here. And then lastly, we made a lot of calculation assumption risks that I think is a bit problematic, right? Number one is we've assumed that synergies is around 5 to 10% year on year. That's like more than double market growth. It is possible, I suppose, but you normally see these numbers only if the company you're purchasing is really inefficient. Unless we have investments that will be made, I don't see how this big of a synergy is possible. And if there are investments that need to be made, then we need to take that into account. And this might actually prevent us from breaking even within 4 years, right? Because there's not much buffer. Right now, our rough calculation is we will more or less hit around 2 billion, 2.1 billion. At the same time, our revenue calculation assumed that our product mix will remain the same, right? That is 60% high end, 15% blah, 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 25% blah, blah, blah. This has implications, right? Because each segment have different growth rates. So if suddenly our product mix becomes primarily, I don't know, value, which we see value's growth rate has actually been decreasing steadily through the years, this might have implications on our total revenue. Okay, so that's it. And then you can say, if I had to prioritize just based on ease of implementation and impact on revenue, I would want us to look at customers first and the chief designer.
Okay. A couple of questions.
Yes.
That's a really deep analysis. But for graph like this,
Yes.
how would you read it?
Which graph is that, by the way?
So it's either the high-end market revenue breakdown by players, and or just like kind of like a square graph that's showing the market share, or showing that our revenue breakdown by segments.
Yeah. So let's go through graph by graph, right? Okay. On what are potential insights. So when you see a similar graph, you're kind of like, this is what I potentially will be able to calculate. So on the retailer revenue breakdown,
okay,
potentially no need to calculate, but at least you know what you'll be able to see here is my immediate thought is product mix.
Yeah.
Or segment mix.
Yeah.
If pushed, you can use this to actually check what's the market share of your high end.
Yeah.
Compared to value and traditional. Okay. The second thing I notice here is I can also see what's the proportion of my customers coming from each age group.
Oh, so this age group.
Yeah. Also important, right? Because it gives you an idea of who your target market is. The third thing you will be able to see, because it's 2008 to 2018, is you'll actually be able to see how the product mix shares has changed, as well as the customer mix.
Okay.
That's what this slide shows.
So can you quickly solve this graph, these two graphs?
You can quickly solve it, but in this case, you don't actually need to.
Okay.
So that's why when you're chart reading, don't solve yet. Just get an idea of what kind of insights and calculations you'll be able to do with each chart.
Okay. Then
on the market revenue breakdown by segment, again, here, it's really just the share of the market by segment, as well as the customer breakdown.
Yeah.
So very similar to red retailer. The additional thing you can do then here is you'll be able to see what is the market share of red retailer per segment. Right? Because you know the total for red retailer high end, and then you can compare it against red retailer market total.
Okay. So
again,
yeah. Can I just say that the I just for me it's like I felt the graph would have so many information that I don't know what type of information could be said here. Can I just say that the traditional high? Can I say the traditional high end is taking the lead both in the market as well as for red retailer? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, you can, right? I mean, clearly, if you look at this chart, okay, if you see my slide, on 2008 market revenue breakdown, it's pretty clear that traditional has a much higher percentage share of total, right? Okay. Whereas high end, it looks like the ages 26 to 40 prefers high end stuff more, which makes sense because these guys have higher purchasing power. But surprisingly, when I look at 2018, that trend has changed. The 13, 17-year-olds and 18 to 25 are actually a lot more, they seem to care a lot more about high-end stuff now compared to 26 to 40.
Yeah.
My hypothesis here is that these kids are spending their family's money because they can afford it. Whereas for 26 to 40 years old, their consumption pattern seems to have changed. Okay. Which is very interesting. Right? And one thing that you would also want to take notice of is you look at the total market for that age group, right? In 2008, 26 to 40 was 1.2 billion. In 2018, it's gone down to 1 billion. Really, really surprising. And one thing that might be causing this is because they're now spending a lot more on traditional and value, which is cheaper than high end. So this market has actually contracted. So these kind of insights you can, without calculating, just by dint of how big, how color, like that color, how much of the page it's taking up, you can kind of make these assumptions already.
Okay.
Okay, then if you look at the projected growth rate, what this will tell you, right? Immediately you can see high end, high growth rate, actually at par with value, but value suddenly drops in 2023, whereas high end remains pretty constant. Traditional, very stable at 3%. Right? That's insight. But equally important, if you were thinking of your calculation, what this will tell you is you will probably need the base numbers for each segment, right? Because your growth rate is not an average.
Yeah.
Then if I look at the next slides around high-end market revenue breakdown by players, the immediate thought here is, okay, looks like I can calculate for market share of Red Retailer compared to others.
Yeah.
But honestly, if I just look at this chart without calculating, I can kind of see that we should probably have around 30 to 40% market share. Around 30%.
How could you tell?
Well, because a huge chunk of our market, we're at 40%. But like at 0 to 12 and 41 to 61, we're at around 20 to 35%. Right? So if I kind of magic the numbers, definitely less than 40%, but I'm pretty sure we're above 20%.
But what about Noi Dai?
Lloyd Depp, right? If you look at it, they have around 20% in the big markets, right? From ages 13 to 40. They've got a much bigger share in the older markets, but those older markets are so small. It's like 0.1 billion each.
Okay.
So if I had to guess, like off the back of the envelope calculation, they probably have around 20-25% market share.
Okay. So we are leading the high-end market.
That's my assumption. Of course, if they ask you specifically, you would want to calculate this, and you can. But just at first glance, you can kind of already have an impression.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Then the market breakdown was spent in Vietnam by apparel type. This is helpful, right? You can see what the breakdown is. Same for breakdown of Red Retailer revenue. We will be like, oh, a while ago, I have growth rate by segment. This is a quick and easy way for me to calculate what the growth rate is or what the actual segment spend is because I've got the percentages.
Yeah.
Then breakdown of sales by channel. Really interesting thing here is that it looks like online sales is decreasing. Really, really weird, right? Anywhere else, traditionally, you would see online sales increasing. Then you look at the next slide and you're like, huh, okay. It looks like our competition were quite similar to Off the Cover, whereas Ngoy Dep really, really is dependent on retail sales. Interesting. Next page, you're like, oh, makes sense that Ngoy Dep has a lot more retail sales because they have so many stores. Whereas for Red Retailer, surprising that our online sales is decreasing because it's not like our stores are increasing. Then you look at marketing spend and you're like, huh, our online marketing spend so much lower compared to Off the Cover. Again, Ngoy Dep makes sense then that their online marketing spend is low, which matches their online sales data. Okay. So all of these things you can actually kind of match together and connect.
Okay.
Right, same goes for customer type, etc., etc. Okay, Zoe, I actually have to run. Any questions before I go?
What recommendation do you have for me to repractice this?
Yes. So number one, what I want you to do is you've got your charts, you've got your slides from your previous interview, you've got
Yeah.
your current slides. I want you to redo the first 5 minutes, right? Your chart reading. Just being able to categorize, think through what data the chart shows and synthesize, right? That's number one. Number two, I'm actually going to give you another case that's very chart heavy. I want you to do the same thing.
Okay.
Right. And I think that's it. The key skill I want you to build here is number one, how to make sense of a huge volume of data. And then number two, force yourself to really structure your thoughts. And you can do this when you're synthesizing each of your charts or each bucket of charts.
Okay. What do you think about my today's synthesis? If you can give a score. I think this is really similar to Mackenzie's case, man.
Yes. So your synthesis actually was good. If I had to score it, it's around 80%. Why? Well, this is your synthesis the second time around, right? When I forced you to synthesize. But synthesis was good because there were clear kind of key messages. Now, I would knock you down just because you forgot about a chief designer, which is actually a pretty big risk, right? And also at the same time, it was good impressions, but you actually missed out on some data points that would have really made your synthesis much stronger. For example, in online sales, probably the reason on channels because you've got low online marketing spend.
Okay, so I think that's correlated with my chart reading
Correct.
and jotting down the notes.
Correct.
Because I think I know all of those. It's just like
yes,
how
you
to
forget to mention it.
Yeah, that's the key message here.
Yeah.
Goldie, do you have time on Monday or on any time? Not on Monday evening or your Tuesday morning. Do you have time on that?
I have to check. I will get back to you.
Okay, cool. Because I just want to maybe have another like a normal case with you.
Just in case. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think for strategy end, their interview process is very messy.
Yes.
So it depends on the interview's like preference.
Yeah.
So it could be hard or it could be easy.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Let me check my schedule and I will get back to you.
Cool. Thank you a lot.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
But just to check, right? So you're not available Monday night. Oh, Monday night my end, so Monday morning your time.
So, because I have an exam on Monday afternoon, my time.
Okay. So Tuesday, because Tuesday night I'm free, which is your Tuesday morning. Would that work?
That works, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Then let me check.
Yeah, because I have my interview on Tuesday evening, so that works.
Okay. Let me see if I can move around my schedule and I'll get back to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Zoe.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.